In this lesson, we look at something called conjunctive adverbs. Sometimes these are called just conjunctions or linking phrases, but as we go through the lesson, you'll see what this means. And what we mean here by a conjunctive adverb is simply words that join an idea from a previous sentence to the next sentence. Or sometimes words that simply join two independent ideas. Have a look at the example. Smoking has increased in some countries, full stop. However, the number of smokers has decreased in other countries. So here the conjunctive adverb is however. However connects the idea in the first sentence, smoking has increased in some countries, with the idea in the second sentence, the number of smokers has decreased in other countries. And here there is an opposite, increase in the first sentence, decrease in the second. And however tells us there's going to be a change in direction in the second sentence. And this word helps the reader or listener to understand that the second sentence is a contrast from the first. So that's a conjunctive adverb, and it's really important to note these words link two different sentences here. Let's look at the various types of conjunctive adverbs then, because there are many. So here are the categories. So common categories: addition, cause or effect, give support, organisation, similarity, contrast, and summarise. So first of all, conjunctive adverbs of addition. There are many of them, but here are three common ones. Moreover, furthermore, in addition. Here's a potential example. The students celebrated their results. In addition, the parents celebrated too. So in addition simply says, here's another idea, and it's similar to the idea in tone to the idea in the previous sentence. The students celebrated, the parents celebrated. Two similar ideas. So it's adding another idea to the previous one. Then cause and effect. Well, words such as these, as a result, consequently, therefore. These are some common cause and effect conjunctive adverbs. Here's an example. The plans failed, therefore a new plan was needed. So therefore introduces the effect, or you could even say the result or outcome. The plans failed was the cause for a new plan. A new plan was needed. That's the effect of the plans failing. Therefore helps us understand the relationship between those 2 points. But we could have said, as a result, a new plan was needed. Consequently, a new plan was needed. Another type of adverb, which is conjunctive, is to give support to some information that came before. And words that could do this are, for instance, to illustrate, or in this case. Here's an example. Many people gave evidence, and for instance, a woman from Canada spoke to the police. So a woman from Canada spoke to the police. That's one example that gives support to the previous idea. Many people gave evidence. How do we know? Well, here's one way that we know. A woman from Canada spoke to the police. It's giving support to the idea that came before. Then there are some conjunctive adverbs that simply help us to organise our speaking or writing. First, second, next, then, after this. So you could say this. First, I learnt about verbs. Second, I learnt about tenses. Third, I learnt about words. So the words first, second, third organise the listener or the reader. They tell them the order of events, and also they remind the reader or listener of the order of events, because if you don't do that, sometimes listeners or readers can get lost if they lose bits of information. So organisational conjunctive adverbs are there to help the reader or listener follow what you say better. Next, similarity. And two common words for similarity are likewise and similarly. So if you use these to join two sentences, you're telling the reader that the second sentence carries on in the same way as the first sentence. There are lots of conjunctive adverbs of contrast, and we saw one in the previous slide with however, but we can also say in contrast or conversely. Here's another example for you. They wanted to visit the mountains, however, they eventually went to the beach. So there's a contrast. The plan was one thing, but the outcome was very different. And however tells us the second sentence is very different to the first sentence. But we could have changed, however, to in contrast. And we could have used conversely as well. But this still tells us there's a contrast between two sentences. They wanted to visit the mountains. In contrast, they eventually went to the beach. Finally, words that summarise, to conclude, or in summary. And what's important here is these words don't often link to sentences, but they often link to sections of writing or speaking. If you think about paragraphs where you have a collection of similar sentences, to conclude will come after a paragraph of similar sentences. It doesn't normally just link one sentence with another. It normally links a lot of sentences with one or two sentences that conclude. So summarising adverbs grammatically are the same, but in terms of use, there is that slight different thing to be aware of.